3, 2.
Andrew Halpenny began his baseball career in Selkirk and played for longtime coach Al Hares in that area. Andrew, let's start right there with your career. Can you tell us about those experiences?
Well, I think growing up in Selkirk, like any young boy or young girl who starts the sport, you grew up with a love for the game of simply playing catch in the backyard with my dad and my brother. Countless hours of makeshift games, and what I do remember about those early days is the time that my dad was willing to spend with my brother and I in the backyard, and always being available and always willing to spend that time with us, and that'll be something that will never be forgotten. Again, growing up in the small town, we were very fortunate where Coach Al Hares started us as a group of young boys all playing together, and we were very fortunate because you grew up and every single year you're playing with similar kids and really growing up and developing with that same group of kids. And what a wonderful group of not only friends, lifelong friends that I still keep in contact with today, but also the families. I mean, it was a small town and we all knew each other, and whether it was one-day tournaments or playing in league play and then going on the road and going into provincial championships, those will be memories that I'll never forget.
As an amateur and as a youth player, you have a pretty interesting resume, very impressive. Provincial teams, national teams, Canadian teams on the international level, including some play at the World Junior Baseball Championships. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I think it was just very fortunate at the time. They came up with the Canada Cup where every province put in a team, and I think that was really the first showcase for kids from Western Canada other than BC and Ontario, where the national teams were predominantly picked for in previous years. So having a chance to not only showcase what we could do, but I think that was my first introduction with the provincial team of ex-players that were now giving back to the youth of Manitoba. It was Gord Ledachowski, Jerry Falk, Jeff Robertson, and of course Gladwin Scott. You put any mention of baseball in this province, you have to mention Gladwin Scott. So you get a chance to play for those individuals and really understand from those playing experiences some of the benefits that they were able to teach us as a group of 18-year-old baseball players, and then really not understanding how the national team process went, but we were selected for an opportunity after the Brandon national tournament to stay in Brandon and try out for the national team. And over a 3-week period, there was about 30-40 of us that stayed in Brandon, and we tried out, and very new to the process of a national team, and was very fortunate enough to make that team. And I think what you take away from experiences like that is what a small pond Manitoba is, and when you start to understand not only playing with kids from all across Canada, but then you enter into tournaments with Chinese Taipei and Cuba and the US and Netherlands, etc. What a wonderful experience that is. And at the time I was very fortunate. My brother, one of my uncles and mom and dad were able to come to Trois-Rivières to watch the first World Championships that I was in, and similarly the following year in Cuba, where I had a lot of family and friends come down as well. So it just made that experience a lot more memorable.
Off the diamond, I'm assuming that a fellow from Selkirk in Manitoba probably hasn't traveled a whole lot. So as a young man here, your baseball now is taking you to various corners of the world. That must have been quite an experience.
Well, you're right, and it's something you don't really forget very easily. And I think what you take away as you start to get a little bit older is the time invested by our parents, that were always willing to take us to tournaments. And it was similar to a hockey rink, that you traveled extensively for hockey as well and for baseball. But some of the memories when you travel to Western Canadian Championships and national championships, and then I was fortunate enough to go to a few World Championships, etc., where the answer was always yes. And when you think back on all the accommodations that parents spend for young kids, it's very, very fond memories.
You also spent a number of years with the Winnipeg Goldeyes. Back then, I think it was still the Northern League, if I recall correctly. I mean, that is pro baseball probably at its lowest level, I would think, but it's still pro baseball, and it's quite an experience, I'm sure.
Well, I think very similar to the national team, being a very naive young man from Winnipeg. It was done my college career, and I was looking at other opportunities, either continuing school or entering the job market. And I think it was an introduction to the Gold Eyes, I do believe, in 1994. And we were a bunch of ex-college baseball players were contacted to come to the open tryout. It was more of a media piece and whatnot, but through that experience, I was invited to the main camp, and over that next 2-3 week period and entering some exhibition games, they had signed a ex-big leaguer as the starting catcher, but being invited to the camp and just going through and understanding the difference between a pro experience and a college experience and then an amateur experience was very, very valuable and helped me in some of the next endeavors that I participated in with baseball.
And that brings us to the point where you've got to walk away from baseball as a living and start to move, I don't want to say back into the real world, but perhaps we can call it a different angle. Tell me about that transition, because obviously it's not an easy one.
Well, it was difficult, and you end at a relatively early age where the game tells you where this is kind of it, and the superstars and the people that excel continue on, and the rest of us get engaged with the real world. I was very fortunate. My last couple years with the Gold Eyes, there was many bus hours, and during one of those conversations, one of the players from New Jersey was working on a business plan to start a indoor teaching facility. So I became very interested in what the plan was, and the concept was very unique to Canada. So very shortly after stopped playing with the Gold Eyes in 1997, I opened arguably Canada's first, I know it was Western Canada's first, solely indoor baseball and softball teaching facility. And that was a very unique concept where until that time, training in the off season was unheard of. You ramped up in spring, you grabbed a bucket of baseballs, you threw as hard and as long as you could, you got ready for tryouts, and then you started your season. Hopefully with a preseason tournament, but that's kind of the way it went. So as we started the business, and I think what I understood from the difference between amateur and professional baseball was when I started, all my instructors had past playing experience. It was very, I guess, difficult to find people with playing experience, but one of my very good friends, Daryl Bruce, was one of the very first instructors that we hired on, and we had Kevin Dotola from the Tampa Bay area, and he was with the Oakland A's athletics organization, and bringing that level of experience and teaching to the kids in the off season really helped in what I feel was instrumental in. By the time we stopped doing the business in 2012, we had over 120 kids from Manitoba that went on to experience college baseball and beyond in professional baseball. And I think, giving kids now where the norm is to train 12 months a season and be very sports specific, we were very fortunate, and the timing was right to open a facility and provide that level of expertise and knowledge from past and ex-players to come in and help, I guess, the next generation of players.
Are there common things that you tell the young players when they come under your hand, so to speak? Is there common advice you give them? And thinking now that they may be watching some of what we're talking about here today, what would you say to them?
Well, I think it goes back to what my dad used to say a lot was, baseball is a very result-orientated business where you see, and there's numbers and stats coming out. There's just an abundance of numbers available. It's the process that we continue to challenge young student athletes to really concentrate on the process and don't cheat that part of the game. Put in the work and understand that the results will come. When you try to go the other way and all you're just focused on are the numbers and the end results, the game has a very funny way of humbling you at the end, and things generally don't work out. So it was a lesson that I learned very young, and it's something today that I truly believe in, and we continue to instill that, whether it's with kids in the off season or now working with my own kids.
Who do you have on your list of mentors, role models, people who influenced you, who you try to emulate when you're interacting with others?
Boy, it's a very good question. I think it has to start with mom and dad. I mean, that's probably the easiest question to answer, that you go back and understand everything that was given to us as young people. Mom and dad is the top of that list. When you get into the baseball specifics I mentioned earlier, you talk about baseball in Manitoba, you talk about Gladwin Scott, you talk about Gord Ledhowski, Jerry Fulk, Jeff Robertson, all the people that I truly respect. Not only have playing experience, but they found a way to give back to the game and share that experiences with us young kids at that time. And I guess the hours on the field that you spend with these experienced people, those are the things that you'll never, ever forget.
Andrew Halpenny, 2022 inductee for the Manitoba Baseball Hall of Fame.
Pleasure.